Hey, Arielle here. It's just me this week. Tim has abandoned us just for a few days. Welcome to the show, and lucky you've hit play on a special episode. Well, every episode is special, right? We all want to believe that. But just hang out for a bit, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Welcome to Trailer Park, the podcast trailer podcast. I'm Arielle Nissenblatt. On TPP, we are all about the art of the audio teaser. On each episode of the show, we play you a podcast trailer, and then we discuss that trailer. Now that we're on week 5 or 6 of the show, depending on when you count the official start of the season, it feels like a good time to check in. And since Tim is not here, we don't have a regularly scheduled episode, so we're going to use this as an opportunity to reflect. And I know feedback from listeners is really hard to come by, so I'll just ask that you check in with yourself. And if you feel so compelled, you can get in touch with me and Tim after the episode. I'll share our contact information later on. So on this episode, here's what's coming up. We've got a brief reflection period. I promise it'll be brief. Then I've got a special episode drop for you. And then I'm going to tell you a bit about our sponsors, and I promise you will want to hear about them. And then we'll close it out and send you off to listen to some more podcasts. So here are some check-in questions for you to consider. First up, have you found a new podcast to listen to as a result of this show? We started off with the trailer for Neuroversity, a podcast about neurodiversity. Then we played the trailer for Sufficiently Black from podcaster Nakia Swinton. Then Serum, which is a show from WHYY's The Pulse and local transmedia. Then we had Where the Stars Fell from Newt Shuttlecotty. Our most recent episode is the trailer for a mini-series called The Inflammatory Wanderer. So I want to know, did any of those trailers get you interested in checking out the full seasons or the episodes that those podcasts had available? Next question. Have you considered updating your podcast trailer as a result of this show? Tim and I are working hard not only to present these trailers to you for the purposes of helping you find new podcasts to listen to, but also to help you, if you're a creator, learn how to master the art of the audio teaser. So we try to let you know what we liked about the trailers, what we didn't love so much about the trailers, what might have been confusing. So have you considered updating your podcast trailer? Have you already updated it? And have you submitted it to potentially be featured on our show? And then the last question, have you tried out any of our sponsors? I ask this because we chose our sponsors really carefully. We wanted to make sure that they were products that we use and that we endorse because they're perfect for content creators, for podcast creators specifically. And as always, they'll be linked in the show notes for you to test them out. So that's it. Those are the questions for our brief reflection period. And just know that I imagine you answered all of those questions aloud in your car or while walking or while washing your dishes. But if you actually want to let us know how you feel, if you want to actually say it to my face, our contact information will be shared in the back half of this show. And I'd love to hear from you. Now, as promised, we've got a special episode for you. It's a treat. It's really a treat. I imagine a good lot of you are here because you love podcasts, whether it's making them or listening to them, or maybe both. With that in mind, I want to introduce you to an amazing show that takes recommendations really seriously. Tink Media is a podcast growth and ideas company started by Lauren Passell. One of Lauren's tenets for her business is that the team should always be working on, quote, one big project that makes us no money but takes up a lot of time, end quote. With that in mind, a few months ago, the team at Tink started Tink's call-in line, 1-844-POD-AT-ME or 1-844-763-2863 in the US and Canada is the phone number. If you call, you'll get a new podcast recommendation every single day. You can even leave a recommendation for a show that you're loving at the sound of the beep, even your own show. Devin Andrade, a podcast and podcast marketing enthusiast who works at Tink, then takes those voicemails and makes them into a semi-regular podcast episode. It's a beautiful, short show with a lot of heart and a lot of love for the podcast world. I'm going to hit play on a 10-minute episode of the call-in show. It is chock full of incredible podcast recommendations from people who are calling in from all over. If you like what you hear, make sure to subscribe to Tink Media's newsletter, Podcast Marketing Magic. That way, you'll have access not only to the podcast, but also to genuinely helpful tips and tricks about podcast marketing and production. Here's the show. I hope you enjoy, and I'll be back at the end to wrap up.
Hello, and welcome to Pod at Me, Tink Media's podcast recommendation hotline. If there's one thing you should know about us, we love a call-in show. So we created our own. Each week, listeners leave their podcast recommendation voicemails on our hotline, and we feature a new recommendation of our own every weekday. Looks like we've got our first caller. Thank you for calling Pod at Me. What's your recommendation?
Hey, Lauren, this is Scott Johnson, the host of What Was That Like? I'd like to recommend a podcast that I listen to regularly. It's called Music City 911. The host is Brandon, and he's an actual 911 dispatcher in Nashville. He plays real 911 calls from all over, not just Nashville, and he talks about the story related to that call. And he also offers his insight from his many years' experience as a dispatcher. And he has an awesome voice for podcasting. So I highly recommend Music City 911, and I hope you have a great time on your upcoming Disney cruise.
Love it. I know he said Brandon has an awesome voice for podcasting, but I think Scott might too, at least if his voicemail is any indication. I guess we'll have to check out his show to confirm. Thanks for the recommendation, Scott, and all the kind words. We're adding What Was That Like and Music City 911 to our queue. Oh, we've got another caller on the line. Thanks for calling Pod at Me. What's your recommendation?
Hi. I would like to recommend Sound Judgment, the podcast that brings today's best hosts on behind the scenes, and together we dissect a favorite episode to learn what it takes to become a compelling, beloved podcast host.
A podcast about podcasting. Wow, we are getting meta already. This is a great show for any podcasters out there looking to learn from others in the industry. Speaking of the industry and business, this show isn't going to pay for itself. Time for a quick break for a message from our sponsors. Okay, no, we do not have any sponsors for this episode, but that could be fun, right? If you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the Pod at Me hotline, don't call us. Send us an email at marketing@tinkmedia.co. Okay, back to the good stuff. Thanks for calling Pod at Me. What's your recommendation?
Hi, Lauren and Tink team. My name is Heather, and I'm going to recommend City of Ghosts. I'm walking around Brooklyn right now, and it's October, and it's been raining for days. And I think it's a really good show for spooky season. And if you're feeling like a little witchy right now, and it's audio fiction, so it's detective style and film noir, and I don't even know how to say that, but you get where I'm going. Ready for October. Love this Halloween. Thanks.
Thanks for calling, Heather. With Halloween right around the corner, we love a spooky recommendation. I also love that she's walking around Brooklyn while she's telling us about the show, because City of Ghosts takes place in New York. Okay, let's get another recommendation going. Thanks for calling Pod at Me. What show should we listen to next?
It's fall. The leaves are changing. People are starting to tweet about upcoming shows for Thanksgiving and Halloween, like The Great Pumpkin. Well, I think the episode about a Charlie Brown Christmas on the podcast called Tracing the Path is just fantastic. Every little nuance of it explained, including a little bit about The Great Pumpkin.
Okay, another seasonal option. Who doesn't like some Charlie Brown? Oh, thanks for calling Pod at Me. What's your recommendation? Okay, sounds like someone is not a fan of Charlie Brown. Does this count as our first prank call? I don't know. That would be pretty cool. But either way, that episode of Tracing the Path sounds really interesting. Added to the queue. Time for another caller. Hit me with your best pod.
I'm recommending my podcast, Your Highness Podcast. It's a show about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable as we discuss people who are making the plant medicine industry equitable in a fair and inclusive way. And that's Your Highness Podcast. One more time.
Wow, okay, Your Highness knows how to leave a compelling pitch. If you're listening to this because you read Podcast Marketing Magic, this is a really great example of a concise and compelling pitch. Love it. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for another recommendation.
Hi. I am reaching out because I just want to congratulate you for this new service. It's a super fun idea, and I will definitely be tuning in every day. And I also want to recommend a podcast that I published in May. It's called Who Holds Up Half the Sky? It's a conversation about advancing feminist activism in China despite censorship and lack of free speech. I created one main episode that is 30 minutes long, and it contains all the interviews that I did with Chinese women and also with people in America and in other countries who have interacted with Chinese women and their stories. So I would really love to share this podcast with the world. It's an awesome storytelling kind of series about these women's lives and how they're trying to stand up for their rights, essentially, in a country that does not typically allow for that. So please check it out. It's on RSS feed and anywhere you get your podcast. It's called Who Holds Up Half the Sky, and I would love it if you could please share this podcast with your community. So thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you for the service, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much for calling with such a great recommendation. We are definitely adding Who Holds Up Half the Sky to our queue. That was a great pitch, too. Let's keep the good pods rolling. What's your podcast recommendation?
Hi, thanks for this great idea. My 24-year-old son and I made a podcast. It's called All Relative, Defining Diego, and it's about his journey to become a Maya Minnesotan. He was born in a Maya village in Guatemala, and we have a relationship with his biological family, and he has a lot of drama in his life, and he's an awesome host. I hope you and your people check it out. Thanks.
Okay, has this hotline solved podcast discovery? I feel like we're learning about so many great shows already. Thanks so much for calling with such a wonderful recommendation. On that note, let's hear another.
Hey, good morning. My name is Frank Rassiopi, and my podcast recommendation is a show called Stand Up and Stand Out. It's a show for college graduates entering the workforce and those looking to make a career transition. It's hosted by a woman named Nikki Green, who left her lucrative tech job to start the podcast, and she has a company and a brand that surrounds that. But it really is excellent. Her recent episodes include how to market yourself as a college graduate, networking, finding your passion, and budgeting and managing your finances as a college graduate. So one of the things I always like about podcasting is when it's able to niche podcasts, which is find a very specific audience. The audience for this is very specific, generally college graduates, but she's very good at it. And for people who are in that demographic, I think they would love it. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
You know what I love about Frank's recommendation? You can tell he's a super listener. He knows those niche shows and audiences can be really powerful. Thanks for calling, Frank. Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Hi, Tink. Didn't mean to leave a message, but now I am because my hands weren't ready to press the go away button when this ended. So thank you for the recommendation. Bye.
You know what? We love this kind of call just as much, and what a perfect one to end on. That's going to be it for this episode of the Pod At Me Hotline. Be sure to give us a call at 1-844-763-2863 with your podcast recommendations and to hear the shows we recommend every weekday. And if you just want to call to tell us what you're up to or how you're feeling, we'd love to hear that too. Thanks for calling. Thanks for listening. And remember to tell a podcast you love them today. Now I need to go not say the word recommendation for the rest of the day.
Welcome back. Thank you, Devin and the Tink team, for sharing that episode of the Pod At Me Hotline podcast. Find Tink Media at tinkmedia.co. Next week at Trailer Park, we're back with a podcast trailer for a podcast about home, identity, and growing up. It's called Where Did I Get Like This? For now, visit our website to learn more about the show and to submit a trailer of your own. trailerparkpodcast.crd.co. If you want to email us, that's hello@trailerparkpod.com. We accept compliments, pictures of animals, and questions about the show. Nothing more, nothing less. Just kidding. We accept more and less. We're also on Instagram at trailerpark_podcast, sharing podcasty things as well as pumping up our podcast industry peers. This show is sponsored by the Vocaster from Focusrite, our audio interface, Capsho, an AI copywriting software, OSHA, our podcast hosting site, AugX Labs, an AI generative video maker, and Recast Studios, our audiogram software. Thank you for making this show possible, sponsors. Listeners, to learn more about them, there are links in our show notes. This show is written and produced by me, Arielle Nissenblatt, and my co-host, Tim Villegas. Our artwork is by Caio Slikta. Back next week with more. Happy trails!